awesome. ZvT is such a mechanical, momentum, tempo-based matchup. We've also seen a few more meta shifts, and it also would probably change depending on just where you are on the ladder as well. So it's really a nice one to focus on. Oh no, you've got to be the party leader.
I have to start the low. Yeah,
That's every time. Even when I've coached someone like a dozen times, every time. So now you've got to make me the lobby host.
Cool. Did you get into the document as well?
Yeah. So you just made me the party leader, I think. So make me the lobby host.
Oh, in the lobby.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
So let's see. Did that load? I think it did. Yes. So we've got. You've been doing. Oh, cool. You've been doing a bit of a review. Is that on every game you've been playing, or
pretty much? Because I'm doing macro. Like if they rush me or something and it's over in 2 minutes, then there's nothing really to report. But yeah, for like a longer game, every single game, I train and go over this. Obviously, losses are more frustrating. So I've noticed over time the losses have less information. So. 4 of the ones that I want to go over today. If you scroll about all the way down, it's number 79, row 79.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit here. I mean, it's been like 5 months since we got together, but basically I've tried to record pretty much everything, and it's been unreal how helpful it's been.
I can imagine
these are my thoughts.
You must be, even when you're losing games after doing this, you must be jumping to realizations a lot quicker, right? Now that you're in this kind of analytical mindset where rather than just going, how did that happen? You must be much quicker at kind of stitching together the clues and going, this mistake led to this being behind. And then that's why I had less army in that fight, that sort of thing.
Definitely. I feel like in ZvT now, I understand what's happening a lot more. Whereas in ZvZ and ZvP, it just things happen. And I'm like, oh, okay. But in ZvT, yeah, I can pinpoint this happens, so now I'm behind here, or this happens, so now I'm ahead here, things like that. But so yeah, this is my thoughts on it. The main thing, column I, was what we were focusing on from last session is 5 minute spending. So I would just kind of go to 4:30 or 5 minutes and see. Basically, what my main metric was, I don't want to go over 1,000 minerals. And in these in these next however many replays we get through, it's all a lot of early harassment, and I feel like my macro was terrible. I practiced my build against AI so much that if I don't get harassed, it usually is spot on. But if the Reaper comes in and messes me up or anything like that, if the Hellions come a little early, then yeah, it's a bit of a shit show.
Okay. So that's cool. Let's take a look. All right. So in this game, I think your opponent skipped the Reaper, right? By the looks of it, yeah. So nice chill opening. No Reaper pressure just yet. You've had the freedom to do whatever you want. You've built quite a few safety Zerglings. Did we lose an Overlord? Oh, we just lost our Overlord sacrificing. Okay, so we're doing just a single Overlord. Is it? And we're always
got caught by Marines really quick, so I kind of assumed something was going on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, because you haven't seen any Hellions, we don't technically need these Zerglings, right? That's a nice optimization. So this is kind of the downside of not having either an Overlord on the pillar or like a Zergling outside the base is if your opponent isn't actually going reacted Hellions, which he is, but they're very late, right? Your opponent's going for what is a very cute Mass Marine Hellbat timing, right? Where that barracks is non-stop pumping Marines. So there's going to be like a mass of Marines. It's almost like a 2-1-1, but with just a single medevac and no stem, and also like 6 Hellbats, right? Really cute build. But what does this give up? Any pressure at the very beginning, right? There's no Hellion activity. So you technically could have gotten away with not building any extra Zerglings at all, right? So we are a little blind here, and we're kind of building these Zerglings at the default time for safety. That's not terrible. It's just one of those things that's a peak optimization when you get really confident in the matchup, something we always want to keep our eyes on as an option. Oh, sorry, my monitor went black for a second. I've been having some issues. I gotta double check my connections and my drivers and everything. No worries, all fixed now. Okay, cool. So you're going 7 queens at a pretty decent timing. Not the absolute fastest, but it should be okay. And then you get your first warning here. So this is kind of where we're like,
It
probably
was
should have had a
little bit
Zergling
earlier.
outside his base, right?
One gets there just as he leaves.
Yeah.
So maybe it is a little late, but I got that notification a couple as he was leaving. So this guy.
Problem is we didn't see the Marines there. I don't think you noticed that, right? Because the
I did
Hellions
not.
kind of roasted you.
Yep.
So that makes it kind of tough. And this is just a very, very powerful attack your opponent's doing, right? They've given up any early poking pressure. No Reaper, no Hellions running around. This is a scary attack. And you don't have a Baneling Nest or anything, which means you're very Queen dependent to defend. So, in general, let's just say, okay, when did we actually send the Overlord in, by the way, to sacrifice? It was kind of a later one as well, right? Because look at when it's coming in. It's like, it is kind of a later one. I think the moment we're denied with no information, we haven't seen any Hellions, we have no info, I think you immediately should be trying to get a Zergling in. Because you said something's up, right? So I think we should immediately be trying to just run 2 Zerglings into his base, right? Just try and just click them across the map, get a glimpse of the army. Because if you saw this Marine count and then you saw Hellions as well, we wouldn't know exactly what it is, but I think we'd have a very good excuse to just drop a Baneling Nest or a Roach Warren or a Spine Crawler at the very least. One of those 3 things.
Right.
Just because you're like, whoa, why has this guy got a big pack of Marines? And also, and like once you see the Hellions as well on top of that, because obviously you'd say you run 2 Zerglings in now. Let's say they come in at what, 415? You see a pack of Marines. You're like, oh, you might think it's a 2-1-1, right? Or something like that. You'd obviously put more Zergling spotters out, but then you'd see him leave his base as well. And you'd be like, oh, he's coming for some sort of big attack right now. And you'd probably see the Hellions. Even if not, though, you'd know there's something coming your way, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Sorry, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, sounds good. Sorry, I'm not sure if my internet dropped for a second. But yeah, so what are you thinking? The immediate Zergling when your Overlord is blocked by lots of Marines, things are a bit suspicious. It's clearly not a completely standard game, right? It's not like Hellions into a quick third command center, because when your Overlord saw 4 Marines and nothing else, that was a bit of a bummer. Right?
And I think that is so obviously I make the first 4 or 2 sets of Zerglings in case there's a Reaper, but in a game like this without a Reaper, it does make a lot of sense that those Zerglings, and especially not seeing any Hellions, those Zerglings are a lot more free to run across.
That's
the map.
actually a really good point. They should be poking already. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah, at this point, you know there's no Reaper. Go across the map. Go have a poke around. And they will already tell you that he's gone reactor first. So you're absolutely right. You can have even earlier warning of what's going on there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. All right, that's very good. Okay, so I'm going to call this Replay 79. ZvT Romanticide. Okay.
Yep.
No Reaper equals Lings go get active. Poke the natural. Could spot reactor first Marines. Okay. That doesn't tell you everything. Reactor first Marines could be 2-on-1. They could be doing like, the 8 Marine drop, and then they just have 3 Hellions that have built one at a time out of the factory that drive across the map. There's a lot of things. But it would already tell you, guess what? You don't need to build those Zerglings.
Around what time is that ideal? Like if the Overlord Scout doesn't see anything, or should they just is it a good idea to always be doing that if there's no Reaper?
If there's no Reaper, always, yeah. This is just literally as soon as you realize there's no Reaper coming in, you're like, oh, I guess we'll go across the map with these Zerglings and just have a poke at the natural and see what's going on. Especially because you didn't even confirm if there was an expansion. So you're actually kind of in a dangerous position against like super weird one-base plays here. Because you're not even with your Overlord checking there's an expansion. So like technically one thing you can do with your first Overlord, seems like you're looking for proxy barracks, I guess, is what you're checking for.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's cool. I mean, if you want to play this way, there's always certain risks in how anyone plays. This is not wrong, right? But this does delay your scout. Whereas like even with your sacrifice overlord, if you went straight across the map, you could like check the expansions there and then pull it back to the right and get it over to your kind of sacrificial position, and that'd be good. So no Reaper. Oh, okay. Poke with your Zerglings. Oh, he's got double marine production. That's fine. Back off with the Zerglings. Set up 2 spotters or whatever, 2-3 spotters. Yeah. Off these alternate builds where they're not really out there with Hellions, I'll often have like a Zergling outside the base, but then I'll have one a little further back as well, right? Just in case like that one dies, and then I want to see, oh, are they actually pushing across? Or maybe I didn't notice the first one. I want to look at the second one and actually see what the army is that's moving out, right?
Yeah,
like a bit of insurance.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was doing as well. The first one just died immediately, and then the second one died pretty quick because they were coming.
Yeah, you didn't have time to set it up.
Yeah. Exactly.
Your Overlord path is like, it's kind of always a bit dicey on this map because like you could come from a little further south and just come in like directly to the barracks, but of course on this map the natural is kind of right there. So on this map, an option actually for a better scout angle, arguably, and this is obviously a meta thing, depends where they're placing their buildings, is you could instead use this second Overlord or whatever that was scouting around the bottom, wherever it ends up, and you could just send it back here. Because there's so much dead space on this map. Yeah. That's like a really cool angle, because they're almost always putting fusion cores and armories somewhere, either on the very bottom left of this main base or the very top left, kind of where the armory is and above that. So coming in from that angle is pretty good for seeing battle cruisers, armories, that sort of shit. And they often don't even see you come in from that angle because Overlords have such longer sight vision than other units. So you might even like see a fusion core or an armory and not even show the Overlord and be like, oh, cool, I know what he's doing. He doesn't know. And that's super cool.
Yep. Cool. That makes a lot of sense. I practice a lot, and sometimes like for one night, just pick one map. So implementing that Overlord change shouldn't be too hard. And I did notice on this, I was kind of thinking like, okay, the Overlord is coming in and is visible to a spotting Marine for so long before it would even see anything. So I kind of realized after looking at this that path is not very good anyways.
Yeah. It's
but
like
I didn't know where to put it, so it's good to hear that.
Yeah, if I was coming in, like I said, I'd be just below this gas with that Overlord and just be coming directly straight from right to left. Even though it seems like they could just move a Marine out front, they're natural. They usually won't. Even Hellions running out are going to go straight south, right? So they probably won't see you. So you can actually be coming in from maybe 2 spaces below that gas geyser and just be going straight left in a line over the depot. Because obviously getting over that reactor tells us so much. Because that's where most of the add-on swapping normally happens. In general, if there's no other buildings there, they're doing some sneaky shit.
Cool.
So, yeah. So, our Lings have gone in. We've seen it's some sort of reactor marine build, right? Theory crafting the situation. You're not building these 12 Lings. That's another 6 drones. But you're also not sure what's happening, right? Could be a 2-on-1. Could be many different things with Marines. So you might be even a little more focused on your queen production, potentially, right? So you've already got 3 queens. You're building your 4th and 5th really well timed. But rather than those Zerglings as well, we're just droning a bit harder. And then we could be queuing up the extra queen on the 3rd base a little earlier. And then a queen on the natural a bit earlier as well, potentially, right? Because you can see here, we are building Overlords a little bit ahead of time, which is not bad in of itself, right? Better more than less, especially because you're timing it to sack your Overlord as well. So it's always good to have extra supply free at this point, right? So this is like not bad. You're also starting 1 extra queen on the natural now. So like this is pretty good. And then we still haven't started the queen on the 3rd at all yet. I think you're just kind of building off your hatchery hotkey. So it just happened to queue up in the main because your main, just finished a queen. And it just picks it randomly or whatever, right?
That is definitely how I do it. So that queen should be on the 3rd then?
Arguably, I mean, if you're going to do it in the main, then you probably want to pull this queen out of the main after she's done her previous inject, right? Because this new queen will pop out with this inject. Kind of depends. Everyone organizes it in their own way, what they prefer. And that way you're kind of like, oh, I'm building a queen on my main and my natural, and those 2 inject, and then I add them to my defense key and bring them to the front. And maybe I miss a few seconds of injecting timing between, the inject and the queen popping out. But it's like I've got 6 queens, 7 queens up front earlier kind of thing. Which can be nice because in this, imagine we don't know this attack's coming yet, right? you're in the mindset of, oh, it's a 2-on-1, about 430, maybe 440. I want to start building Zerglings to go with my like 6 or so queens that are going to be out front my base to defend the 2 stim medevacs worth of Marines, right? And then you see this push out and you go, oh, okay, it's something else. Obviously, just building a spine is the quickest thing you can do to respond. Just build a spine like in your 3rd mineral line or whatever. The moment you see this move out. What's the other thing? Let's imagine we saw this just a few seconds earlier. You see it's Hellions and Marines. Let's imagine we see that, which I don't think you saw in the heat of the game because you just got little warning. But let's imagine, let's go back a few seconds. Let's imagine we get a few seconds extra. Let's imagine the ideal scenario. Because, okay, we see Marines and Hellions move out here. You're in this exact situation. You're taking control. What exactly do you do?
I would probably want a Baneling Nest. In previous sessions, we've talked. Oh, I like having queens as well, so that's kind of why I mean, it's not. I don't think it's that unreal to have this many queens in ZvT, but I like having a lot of queens. But I would probably want Banelings. Seeing that would be my first go-to tech to add on, I guess.
That's cool. That's theory crafting. You're in the game. No time to dilly-dally. We can do that after. Right now, we want to go, bam, you're in the game right now. What are you doing? Dropping a Baneling Nest? Surely there's more you're doing than that. Tell me exactly what are you doing in what order. You've just seen this attack coming. You're in game right now. Imagine, let's think of the more ideal response after. For now,
okay.
Pick a confident response. Go.
So this is probably what I would do. I would try and inject first, then I would grab all those queens and bring them to the defense group and bring them up. I would probably want to make overlords, but that's something that I miss often. But I would deal with the queens and bring them up, and then just probably spend all my money on Zerglings.
Okay, so no Baneling Nest in there, or is that the first thing you do?
I probably in the moment, and I don't do it here. I don't think. No, if I'm just thinking I'm in the game, I'm doing it. That is something that I would miss, I think.
Okay, but let's imagine you were to take over right now. Where
so
you have this planning. Like I'm saying, right now, you take over this game at this moment. You get to go back in time, hop into this game. Do you drop a Baneling Nest first, or what?
I would.
All right. So Bane Nest and then inject, then grab queens, bring them all to the front, throw them onto your defense key, add a few overlords, dump everything else into Zerglings.
I think so, because the Baneling Nest is it takes a while, so why would I not want to do that first, right?
Absolutely, you got to do that first, for sure. And everything else was really good there as well. What are a few little bonus things that we could do? Well, a really big one is this is a Marine Hellion attack. We should know this is a Hellbat attack. If there's lots of Marines and Hellions coming, we know it's Hellbats. Zerglings are going to absolutely suck balls against this. Do we still build lings? Yeah, you don't have any other option. So, yeah, but you've got 16 lings already out. So, can you see my signals on the minimap?
Yes.
Move your Zerglings on those 2 points. So, they can be rallying Hellions 2 at a time, which morph into Hellbats at the front. They can be rallying Marines 2 at a time. Those are going to reinforce this push really well. Also, their wall is often not up when they're doing a Hellbat timing. Unless it's a very late Hellbat timing, most players don't have their wall up because they ain't building that 3rd command center on time that normally finishes the wall for them. So send your Zerglings around, and Zerglings are way faster than Marines. So if you react right now, drop a Baneling Nest, send your Zerglings, then do all that other injecting stuff, send all lings to backstab. Now, obviously, new Zerglings you're building aren't going to be able to do that, so maybe they go on a different hotkey. So maybe part of sending them to backstab is also dumping them or sending them on a different control group. And the idea is, even if they see a wall off, you're going to force him to keep extra Hellions at home, and then you can bring those in from behind, which is the only way you want to engage a Hellbat timing anyway. If you attack it from the front, lings are running into clumped up Hellbats, they do nothing. But if you come from behind, they're surrounding the Marines naturally, and they're also coming in a little bit after the fight started, which means that the Hellbats have spread out to chase your queens, right? As your queens kind of stagger backwards in a bit of an arc, you're kind of pulling your queens back 1 or 2 at a time. So that's when Zerglings are actually effective units. But if they're attacking that front on, it's really bad. So even if you have less time to respond and you can't do a full backstab, say the Hellbats are already here in your face, you would still queue your Zerglings like this. or like this. Do you see what I mean there?
Yep.
Just so that they're behind, intercepting any rally, and then ready to come in as the fight gets a little scrappier. And they'll still help quite a lot, especially if your opponent breaks formation, right? If your opponent lets the Marines get too far from the Hellbats, Lings do great versus unupgraded Marines. Or if the Hellbats spread out too much and suddenly Lings can surround individual Hellbats, Hellbats aren't actually really a counter to Zerglings anymore. So 2 little adjustments there. We could also, if you were like, oh shit, obviously a Spine Crawler is an option as well, right? Now that's if we're really like, I don't feel ready for this. Oh shit, I'm gonna poo my pants. Oh no, kind of thing, right? So that's just an option which we don't want to care about for now. But I like this now. So it's just two small adjustments. It's like Baneling Nest, send Lings across, and then do the other things. Inject, pull your queens to the front, make overlords, spend all money on Zerglings. Would you build extra queens? I feel like extra queen production is pretty important here because you're pulling every queen to the front. So you kind of, number one, want to replace the injecting queens if it's a clean hold. And if it's a dirty hold, well, shit, those queens might actually pop out and have to come to the front to, like, you know, deal with the dregs of this attack, right?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that is just not on my list if I'm dumping all my minerals into Zerglings. I guess it depends on how much larvae I have, but
Well, would the queens maybe take priority over Zergling production? Since we've said Zerglings are kind of not really... If you don't have your Baneling Nest ready, you've already seen the attack coming. Banelings probably ain't going to be ready in time, to be honest.
yeah, that's a good point.
On a bigger map, you see at the moment it moves out, it might happen, right? Definitely it's going to be kind of frantic, but I would actually say queen production is more important than Zergling production. Because
Okay,
you're
that
always
makes
going to get
sense.
out enough Zerglings to morph into Banelings no matter what. Now, this is obviously a choice, right? If they break formation consistently, the Zerglings are the better unit for cleaning it up. They pop way quicker. It's like half the build time of a queen, maybe less. I think a queen's like 35 seconds or something. I don't know exact queen build time. It's something long. Zerglings 17 seconds, I think. It's like very, very quick, right? So Zerglings are going to be way better if they break formation, but if your opponents are really good at keeping their units together, Zerglings popping out ain't going to do nothing until they're able to actually safely morph into Banelings. It's all going to be about like queen count and that sort of thing. So there's choices here. There's different priorities. I don't think we need to necessarily do everything at once, but like normally I do like to say like, hey, we're either very mineral focused or kind of a bit more gas focused. Like we can simplify it and say, don't even bother with the Baneling Nest. Just drop a spine, mass produce queens and lings and use those units correctly. And that'll usually get you through most scenarios. So if this gets overcomplicated, we'll revisit that and simplify it. But for now, we've got kind of like a much bigger list, right? There's a lot of things to do on that list right now. So it kind of
Yeah,
does get a little intense. And
that makes a lot of sense. Especially, I like the idea of prioritizing queens because often with an attack like this, I find they do push in a little bit and then they're in the middle of my rally points. And if I'm making Zerglings, then I can never collect them. Like I don't have the APM and micro enough to collect them and then send them all in. So I shave off a lot of those Zerglings as they just run by the army. So I think queens are a much better choice.
yeah, for sure. You accidentally threw some drones in your
Yeah.
control group here, and you've only got 5 on the control group. So where are the queens at? Okay, now you've got 6 on there at least. That's all right. We're expecting to lose our base. We're dropping 2 spines. So yeah, imagine if those lings did get in before the wall-off was up, it would be huge. He actually realized this was a threat. But if you reacted when he moved out, I don't think this wall-off gets up in time.
Yeah.
Good chance that doesn't, right? Because he's already walked all the way across the map to your base. So
Yep.
that's good to know. But you can see here, we're not really producing. We're not going the Baneling Nest. We're also not building queens. So I don't mind the 2 spines, the rebuilding the other hatch. For sure, this is a pretty scary army. We don't want to go too far down and get our queens caught. But we should be mass producing queens, and it should have been a little smoother bringing the queen from the main. What I saw here was a lack of practice with quickly pulling the queens to the front. This is one of the harder things to do mechanically. Takes a little bit of practice. Tells us you just need to be a little bit more confident in what's happening. It's much harder to do if your brain is racing and you're going, shit, what do I do right now, right? Because you're going, oh no, I can't beat that. I'm going to take a base. Oh, should I build spines? We spotted this army like 30 seconds ago. 20, maybe that's exaggerating. 20 seconds ago. You know, how have we not started the spines or a baneling nest yet? Whichever one of those we went for, or extra queens. It's just because we didn't have a set play here. So I want you to choose. Are you still going to go the baneling nest or the spine? Which one do you prefer? Because we want to, or are we going to try to go both? And are we going to prioritize building extra queens as well? Like looking at this list that I've written in the document, like, does this actually work for you? What do you think?
Let me just
under attack.
My man.
Right in the top of the document.
Yeah. I do like this. I think most of it, the biggest thing that changed for me is the very first one is no Reaper Lings go get active. I think if I can do that, then I can see it's a lot easier to get to that list.
Yeah, well, you'd probably have a few more queens a bit earlier anyway, just because you
Yeah.
didn't build the extra Zerglings earlier. So definitely it gives you a better starting point. By just a little bit, right? A few more drones earlier, a bit more minerals, a few more queens earlier. That's cool. Like your queens are maybe 10 seconds faster or something, like your 6th and 7th queen or something like that. But it's not massive. Like in terms of those, still, when the attack comes, you still need to do a lot of things very quickly.
Yeah.
So looking at that list, imagine you're in that circumstance, similar to this game. Are you confident there?
Well, I guess no, just because I haven't practiced it a lot, but it's...
So I mean, do we want to take something out like the Bane Nest or the Spine or something? Like what would you do? You want to actually? Because this is, I feel like it's too many things. So I always say,
I would take
whole-ass
this-
one thing, don't half-ass 5 different things.
Right.
And I've told you too many things. I think for your APM, like you're a pretty fast player. Don't get me wrong, but it's a lot of things where if we just do 2 of these things well, we don't need to do the rest of it. Like I've defended a ton of these attacks with nothing but queens. And just the Zergling backstab. Like that's and I've defended a lot of very committed Hellbat timings with that. I'm not saying that'll always work, but sometimes it's better to have like a simpler response, you know?
Right. I would probably take the spine out. I know that's what I did in this game, but that is probably like a last ditch, or it's my. I actually don't know what builds quicker, a spine or a baneless. But I guess as soon as the spine's done, it starts attacking. So that's probably my like, oh shit, this is happening right now. I have to get something up. And if the scouting is better, then that becomes that should happen less, right? And I should be able to respond with the baneling nest quicker. So I would probably take the spine out. And then maybe the Zerglings and just focus more on queen production instead of Zerglings in those scenarios. Because I find even in like some late game scenarios, I just build too many Zerglings and then I have no minerals left. I have a huge gas bank and no minerals just because my default response for I need units is Zerglings, right? So maybe
which especially in late game isn't the best. Let's stay focused on this scenario though, because definitely you could still build a lot of Zerglings. If you're not building spines, we'll drop the Baneling Nest just in case, like, you know, who knows, maybe the situation drags on or they dilly-dally, or it's like a later one and there's 14 Hellbats or something ridiculous. Okay, we really need Banelings or Roaches for that. Like, you know, that's effing crazy if someone's waiting for like a crazy Hellbat count and it happens, right? Like, look at this, round 2, right? We really wish we had Banelings here right now. Oh, shit. Okay. Bane Nest, send all links to backstab, do our injects, pull all the queens to the front. We're also going to make overlords and queen production. So I feel like production is the most important, actually. So let's go queen production and spend money on Zerglings right after the Bane Nest at the very top here. So that's kind of what we produce. And then we are like, okay, send our links to backstab, inject, grab all queens to the front, make overlord. We'll add a little sub point. If natural is walled, bring lings in from behind. Awesome. All right, what about the micro, my dude? The micro is definitely something we could have done a little bit better on that first attack. So you kept your queens in a clump. The 101 of don't do that with your queens up against a Hellbat timing. Number 2, spine crawlers. If you do build emergency spine crawlers, you want to be building those out in the middle between your natural and your third. Because otherwise they don't cover it. Especially in this case, like you end up taking the other hatch. You didn't know that, but in general, just try to build your spine or 2 out in the middle. But when he comes up here, we should already be pre-spread. Notice you're keeping your queens in a clump. That's bad. You want them in an arc. Even if you just box these queens, click half of them to the right side, that's going to be amazing. What should we be doing with these Zerglings? Remember what we said? Get them behind. Get them ready to come from behind.
Yeah.
And then if your queens are spread out, all you need to do when the fight happens, sure, if the medevac's exposed, you can click on it, but even that's like a little dangerous. If there's just 3 on the left of this ramp, 3 on the right of this ramp, you just pull them back. Click back the one at the front, pull it back. You just spread them backwards, one at a time a little bit, and you just drop transfuses. See what you've just done? You put them in a clump. That's Hellbat City. They would love... Oh, cool. We can stay in a nice tight clump where we're immune to Zerglings, so we can just jump on your queens. Luckily, your opponent does go forward with the medevac, so you get a nice snipe. But notice, your Zerglings are coming in. Big clump. There's still Hellbats right on top of the Marines. Whereas if our queens were over where that Overlord is, that Creep Tumor on the right, that Queen on the right, and they're spread in this big arc across this entire area, your opponent can't close in with everything at once. So you can pull back any exposed queens that are taking too much firepower, and he can't really focus them down. He's never going to get Hellbats to hit more than 1 queen at a time with their splash damage, and he's going to have to spread out. It's just going to happen, and then your Lings come in from behind, and you get an amazing fight, and you don't lose anything.
Right.
Whereas here, none of this was prepared. We've just started the Baneling Lust. We've just started building Overlord. You're kind of trying to figure out what you should be doing in the heat of the moment, which is why your reactions are a bit slower. It's why after killing that medevac, these queens, like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, I would be pulling these queens to the left. These top 2 queens, I'd peel to the left. These bottom 2 queens, I'd peel to the right a little bit. I'd be dropping a transfuse or 2. You know, there's so many things that I want to do because I've fought 1,000 Hellbat timings, like more than 1,000 at this point, probably. So it's deeply ingrained in me is how to defend it with Queen Zergling. But that's the real rule that I'm applying there. Queens in a spread, okay? Queens in a concave / spread. Pull back the weak ones. Transfuse. Focus medevac if it comes too far forward. But if they quickly pull that back, you've got to quickly give an attack move with your queens, or they're all going to move into the Hellbats, and that's really bad. And then Lings A move from behind.
Yeah,
once
okay.
The fight is
I think
underway.
the 2 pieces I was missing for this is don't clump the queens and to bring the Zerglings from a different route, because that's why I brought the queens back and let them come up the ramp, because I'm trying to do that Zerglings from behind move that way. But yeah, it makes more sense to hold the ramp and then send the Lings around a different route.
Yeah.
So I think those 2 pieces, those are not things that I was thinking of, and that makes a lot more sense. But
Yeah.
I'm aware of the, try and make the queens fight it and get the Lings in behind, but the specifics of that, not clumping them, and I
want you to visualize how you move those Zerglings as well. So imagine this scenario, 3, that's your control group feelings, and it's just right click, shift right click, right?
Yeah,
that's it. Shift clicking units around to flank is like, once that becomes like a really deep habit in a scenario, like it's just so clean and simple, right? A lot of people, I think, something I realized, it was like a random Twitch chat comment where they're like, how are you setting up your flanks? And I just realized a lot of people never use shift when they're setting up like a flank, or they're moving 2 armies to kind of come from 2 sides. They're trying to like just move one army, click, 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 go to the other army, click, 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 click. And I'm like, oh, this is just unnecessary. Like shift click is the chillest mechanic, setting up flanks all the time. So that's really cool. So this is another fight where same sort of scenario would have worked, because this is like, this ramp is actually the best angle to defend Hellbat timings from, right? It's so nice. Imagine if your 2 spines had moved up, and then like you're just spreading your queens back, and a spine is like a mega queen, right?
Right.
300 hit points, almost double the hit points, and 2 armor rather than 1. So they take no damage from Marines, not that much from Hellbats as well. And you drop transfuses on them, they also do way more damage. So this here, even though this is a lot of Hellbats, because you had 2 spines, you would have easily defended this if you had just moved those spines up before it got up your ramp. And you would just be like, awesome, pull back the queen, spam your transfuses. And this is a really common scenario where your opponent's done a really nice Hellbat timing. Remember, I was like, dude, this is actually a really good attack your opponent's doing. Yeah, they skipped the Reaper, but it's like really good. Your opponent's follow-up is hot garbage. The first attack did great. It traded well. And what progression has there been? Since when did that hit? 5 minutes? Let's check.
Yeah, about that.
It hit a bit before 5 minutes. This is a real quick timing. And obviously, it took a while to get up the ramp. But what progression has there been for your opponent's position? They hit you off like 28 workers, 3 minutes later, where's your opponent? 36 workers. And it's just doing another Hellbat timing. So that next Hellbat, this is what a lot of players aren't, they just don't transition out of their attacks, right? You've made the same mistake we all have before, right? You're like, well, this attack did well. I think maybe I'll build more Roachling and go for the same move again. It's like the classic dummy move in StarCraft is it's like, you think the other guy's not going to be ready for the same attack again? Well, your opponent actually got lucky and you weren't this game just because you were kind of thrown by what happened and didn't move the spines forward. But if you'd moved the spines forward, you'd be like, not just back in this game, check it out, dude. You're economically ahead here. Yeah. All you need to do is defend this next wave, and you really could have done it. So let's look at this one more time. Once again, Zerglings see another move out, a lot of Hellbats. Let's go to your camera. Let's look at your camera as you see this, okay? And what are we doing here? We are programming a response, a set play deep into your brain. So we are actually getting reps right now, watching the replay, imagining what you do. All right. You're like, oh, a Hellion killed me. Unfortunately, you didn't realize what the hell's happening here. Until way too late, yeah. And then you ran your Zerglings into it. Oh, no. No, what are we doing? I think you just thought it was like 2 Hellions or something.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking though.
So what happened, right? This is classic.
Honestly, I think sometimes with the way, no, it seems like I do move them forward. They get, I feel like I don't pull my lings back enough and they get aggroed in a lot. Which may have been what happened here, but it happens to me way too much.
This is it. Well, the thing is, you didn't see the first Zergling die. You went to it a bit late and you just saw a burning corpse and you were like, well, I don't know, there's some Hellions. So you had no idea what was coming across the map, and then you decided to headbutt it with your Zerglings. This is like 101 of my Bronze to GM series, which is also 201, 301, 401, 501. Every single game I won in Bronze to GM through every league was almost always like, oh, there's some shit happening. I don't know what that is. I'm surprised by it. Pull way back. Don't take the fight. Oh, okay, now I see what the army is. Now I'm ready for it. All you need to do is pull back, morph Banelings, move your spines forward. Easiest hold of your life. You have everything you need and more to hold on. But for whatever reason here, you were, I think, thrown off because the early game was a bit scrappy. And this is where we start to get chaotic. So, let's imagine, okay, there's lots of Hellions coming out. So, we should always expect another Hellbat timing in this scenario. Always. Assume that's the case. Even if it's not. Even if your opponent's just built 6 Hellions for map control, assume it's a Hellbat timing in future. What do we do? So we know there's round 2 of Hellbat timing. You're taking control. Bam. You're in control. Tell me right now, exact list. What are you doing?
If I see that, morphing Banelings.
Exact. You're going to morph Banelings where? Right now? Out front of the rocks? Tell me exact order of actions. You're taking control. Look around this game. Tell me exactly what you're doing.
So I would bring all my Zerglings to the top of the ramp where all of the fights have happened so far and make some Zerglings. Inject and...
So make Zerglings or Banelings, did you mean that?
Sorry, make Banelings.
How many?
Pull the Zerglings back.
What do you mean make Banelings? How many?
I don't know. Often when I do,
make a decision right now. You're in game. Come on. There's no pressure. You're outside of game. I'm trying to make it pressureful because making that decision. Snap, go. You've got to make a decision. All you know is there's some Hellbats coming. You have no idea how much it is. How many are you going to make? Go.
12.
12, did you say?
Yeah.
12? Okay. So you're going on the safe side. That's fine. That's fine. We would rather overmake than undermake. That's cool. So we make 12 Banes, and then you said, what, inject and make Lings, was it?
I would inject and make Lings, yeah, because it seems like I have some supply to work with. So Overlords are not the first priority.
Yeah. Remember, this is not about planning. This is about just doing right now. So what else? Come on. Inject, build Zerglings. What's next? You need to be thinking ahead, not reasoning why you're doing a thing.
Inject and bring the queens up.
Yeah. So bring queens to the front. What else?
Fan them out. Don't clump them.
Spine crawlers. You've got 2 spines you forgot to utilize. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's obviously situational to this game. Hopefully we don't always have that, right? That might be a special thing.
That's
so
right.
That might not apply in a lot of other games, but in this one specifically, we'd bring those, right?
Yeah.
Bring queens to the front and fan them out. Awesome. Dude, that's perfect. I mean, so the important thing there is, though, I want you now to imagine you're in this game. Go to your camera if you're not already. You've just panned over and said, oh, there's Hellions coming. I don't know what this is exactly, but I assume it's another Hellbat timing. That's just what I'm going to assume. We're playing safe. And imagine, what are we doing? We're double tapping 3 to jump back to our lings. We're right clicking them back up here. We're morphing banelings on top of the ramp. Inject, 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 make Zerglings, grab the queens, pull them to the front, move the spines forward, bam, bam. And imagine you're pressing the hotkeys, you're doing that. Easily hold this attack, cause 6:48, how long do we have to get ready? Obviously, this is not happening. He's morphing Hellbats. You'd have about 20 seconds before he gets up that ramp.
Yeah.
That's plenty of time. I think you can absolutely do it in that time. Are your banelings necessarily all finished morphing and stuff? Nah, but they only take 14 seconds to morph. Hellbats are real slow and clunky. You'd definitely get that in time. But it's not even something where you need to be that fast at executing each action. You could dawdle on some things. It's just about we need to know what we're doing straight away, right? And just be able to like snap. Hellbats are coming, pull back, make banes, get the queens up in an arc, inject, pull extra queens to the front. You do that, you got this in the bag. But that's got to be like a muscle memory thing. So every time we face a Hellbat timing from now on, or something that looks like it might be Hellbat timing, that's our response. We're just going to pull that set play out of the book, and we're going to just bam, 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 like clockwork.
Yeah. That is my main issue is I don't know what to do often. And I panic and I think, oh my God, okay, just try and, I don't know. And then they're there, So yeah, my main issue is I don't have a plan for often for an early attack. I have a macro plan if I don't get attacked early, but yeah, if they push in, I often don't know what to do.
Yeah, man. Dude, it's so funny because like I always draw the Age of Empires comparison because I'm learning that at the moment. I'm really bad at it. And there's so many games where I just don't know what to do in a situation, and like I freeze up so bad because I'm just like my brain's like, what I do here, and I always am like, okay, just draw on my StarCraft experience, like pick a plan, and this often happens after the game, not in the game, right? I'm not a fucking person who can instantly make decisions, but I can try to program them for the future confusing scenario, right? We're like, just keep macroing is like one of the things, right? I'm like, okay, like if they've got this, I'm gonna like, okay, next time I see this specific problem, I'll try. I don't know if this is the perfect response, but I'm gonna do this. So I have that little set play I can draw next time, and then just keep spending my money and doing all the normal things to get to the next step of the game, right? Because otherwise what happens is we fumble the response because we're kind of going, do the queens defend this? Like, you're kind of running your queens forward now. We're not morphing banes. We're not morphing spines. So what are we doing? We've got 286 current APM, and it's not being used for anything effective, right? And that's always the thing we find in RTS games. You don't need to be that fast. It's like we just need to have a little bit more organization, some sort of set play, some miniature game plan or reaction that we can pull on. So we're going to have way more confidence with that now. Lings go to set up the flank, the queen spread in the arc. It's going to be beautiful. You don't even need to do the fancy ling flanking stuff if you've got baneling tech. It's just a bonus. Hey, I might as well. Oh, there are depots down. Isn't this surprising? This is not surprising, dude. Honestly, if you start spotting Hellbat timings early enough, the easiest wins of your life. Because those lings kill every SCV on their natural while you defend with an arc of queens and some banelings or whatever. It's like, it's actually insane. Yeah. So this is like the one time I can actually get way ahead versus a Terran who's like 1,000 MMR higher than me, is if they do a Hellbat timing and I spot the armory early. And then it's like, awesome! I'm going to ravage them with lings and defend with an arc of queens, and it's going to be really nice. Awesome, dude. So I think this is really good because Hellbat timings come in so many different flavors. We've got a few little set pieces that can be adapted to each of those situations. Once again, we see, imagine those queens in a big arc. Would this be enough queens to defend this? Fuck no, this is a crazy Hellbat timing, dude. But with the spines, it would be. Without the spines, no. But we want to see that pattern every single time, no matter what, and you'll be in a pretty good spot. So, I think this is probably most of this game decided from here. Obviously, you've got so much money, there's a chance to come back, but do you want to just go to the next one, or is there other questions in this game?
No, I think in my notes I even said kind of game is over after the second attack, so that's fine. And the other one's a little quicker.
Cool.
It's only 10 minutes, I think.
Your opponent did play max. There probably was a way back into that game, especially if you held down the drone key. So we saw that you did freeze up afterwards in that you weren't redroning, but that's fine. I mean, there's only a few actionable points per replay is already more than enough. And
Yeah.
we're going to tend to fall apart in games where things don't go well. It's always worth some of our effort, you know? Crisis management, how to make comebacks, yada yada. It
Yeah.
is worth some of it, but
But
it's
I mean, I feel like the main
yeah.
issues are at the beginning there. It's not worth practicing to
It's
come
not as
back.
high value for sure. Yeah. Learning how to defend a Hellbat timing consistently, right? For all your games, it's like, or how to come back from being 20 drones behind. It's like
Yeah.
the 20 drone behind, you'd be amazed how many games that can win for you, right? If you have some sort of like focus and plan there. And that's cool. But I mean, the main skill there is almost like a mental thing where it's like the ability to quickly recognize, oh, I'm dead in this game. Cool. I have nothing on the line anymore. Let's just go really, really hard and see if we can make like a comeback. I'm gonna build 50 drones in a row off just a handful of roaches. And if I could do that, then I'm gonna make the biggest Ravager Lingbane army and see if I could just win one big fight. You know, like you give yourself like a simple game plan and you embrace the absolutely massive gamble that's gonna no doubt be inherent in it. But that's its own kind of advanced thing. So what are we looking at in this game? Was there a specific question? What number is this in the spreadsheet, by the way?
This is the next one, 80.
Oh, okay. Right after.
So yeah, Reaper I think messed me up pretty early. This one, I think Widow Mines, I threw the game to that.
Okay.
But it's I think all of these games, it's a collection of games where it's just early harassment that I can't handle and it messes up my build.
Okay. So you don't hide a drone at the third. Oh, yes, you do. There's a drone over at the third. No worries. All right, so we're trying to do some Ling micro here. We're droning
Which
while it's
I'm
happening.
not
This is perfect
very
so
good
far.
at.
You're totally fine. Losing a Zergling is not too bad. Even if you lose a drone, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, it's frustrating, but like what else happens to
I think
pros,
I
man?
do.
We're gonna put a creep tumor down. Third hatch is down. This is totally fine. It's good defense so far. Oh, did he just get another drone, was it? No, it was just another Zergling. Who cares? That's fine. So one thing is, like, if they're going to be annoying with their Reaper like that, you can just take this queen on the main. Just put her up on the top right of the hatch, just so she's a little closer to come over if needed. Not a big deal, but can help you out. You're already building your Overlord and more drones, which is great, but you haven't started your third queen. You started your third queen. Perfect. Okay. Normally I build that from the natural, but I imagine you're going to pull this queen from the main down there.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's going to inject and come down. She should be anyway. Okay. Feels like
happens
you're still
pretty
getting distracted by this Reaper, right?
I probably am.
You're macroing perfectly fine, but definitely we can tell you're a little bit uncomfortable with it. You're like, piss off, Reaper, get out of here, man.
Yeah.
Just from the way you were moving your Zerglings there, I was like, oh, this just looked a little bit like, because there's no reason for you to be interacting with that Reaper. Your Zerglings can just be chilling on the ledge or something like that, right? Just hit it if it jumps up, right? That's a nice way of simplifying this scenario. Just leave like your fours. And if you lose 2 lings, maybe you build 2 more. You know, maybe you like having 4 lings, whatever. But your queen can sit out front. You haven't brought your queen to the front, and you're microing your Zerglings. That's what I'm looking at. Why are your Zerglings running back and forth when your queen? You should have a queen out front, and you should be spreading your creep, right? So let's take a look. This is still a very good opening in terms of droning. Where's that creep spread? There we go. Okay. Yeah, this is fine. So bring that queen from the main down. We're a little slow to get kind of a second Schumer on the front, right? You're already focused on injecting the third by the looks of it. And you'll notice so the way you did it by building the extra queen in the main, that was kind of not where you needed it, right? So you had this extra queen pop out here before the previous inject was even done. Notice? Mm-hmm. So a real small thing, but I'm just noticing here that basically replay 80 Jagannatha versus I don't know how you say this player's name. Third queen in main. Do you always do that? The third queen in the main?
Yeah, the way I build my queens is just select my hatcheries and build them because I don't have I've never really gotten to the habit of doing it any differently. And I feel like sometimes like I just don't have the critical thinking to change that right now in game.
Yeah, I mean, I only really do it for my third queen for the most part. I might click on my third hatch maybe when it first finishes and queue up another queen because I'm just waiting for it to finish, you know? I've already got queens building on the other one. I don't want to like just queue a queen up where I've already got I don't want to queue 2 queens on my main or something like that, right? But other than that, I would just queue it from the natural just because, because otherwise this just doesn't time out as nicely, right? Where this queen is injecting and then you've just got injecting overlap in the main. Whereas if you think about it, if that third queen pops out at the natural, she can immediately run over and drop another creep tumor. So is this worth doing? Maybe it's a real small change. I know it seems like a deep habit, and so you're like, I normally build it from the hatchery. I think it's small to change. I do think it is. Is it the highest priority thing? No, it doesn't matter too much. But it's a very small note we can maybe think about. Let's move on. Doesn't matter too much. All right. Have we got an Overlord going out the right side? Yes, we do. Great Overlord spread. But we don't have any queens up the front yet. So that's an issue here. So you've already done your inject in your main and your natural, but you haven't brought those queens to the front yet. Now they're added to your key. Let's see, when did we add these to our key? So you don't have any queen on your defense key yet. Okay. So early on, this queen should be on our defense key, right? And the other advantage is like your first queen on your natural. Some people like to just put that on the defense key straight away. Just so it's like, oh, the Reaper's being annoying, she chases it. And she kind of secures the first early 2 creep tumors just so you get a bit more mobility. Let's see when you put on those queens on those keys. Because like for me, if I were in your shoes, I'd be like inject, add to creep key, inject, add to creep key. Then I've got 3 queens up front that are kind of defending right now. Yeah? And that way...
I can tell you what cool. I do is like the first 3 that come out are the injecting ones. I don't bring them out. So yeah, that is maybe something that I need to change.
If your opponent's in your face with Hellions, absolutely. If they're sitting back, it doesn't matter. You can just inject all day. You can spread a creep all day, right? But there's Hellions here right now. And we shouldn't be like, oh, shit, I need to now control group these. Like, it just, you know, if your opponent's in your face with Hellions, for sure, getting those queens to the front is nice. So now you've got 4 queens on a key, but you're kind of sitting back. It's like, hey, this is our territory. Those Hellions and Reapers have no business being here. But you're kind of sitting back because you're being forced to reorganize. So this maybe tells us that we're set up for a game where the Terran does nothing, and we're being forced to react for what should be a pretty standard pressure, right? 2 or 4 Hellions poking around with a Reaper. So maybe we should change our opening to be a little more like, no, by default, we have 3 queens ready out there the moment we have 3 queens, and we rely on the next queens popping out to replace them. Do you think that's worth investing in?
Yeah, definitely. Because this is the kind of thing that I feel it makes me feel really uncomfortable in the game, and that's a pretty easy fix.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a pretty no-brainer. I think there's so many Terrans doing weird openings and just sitting there Hellions at home that you'll get away with it too much, which is probably why this is developed as a habit where you're like, well, more than half the time I can just chill. So, you know, it doesn't feel like you should change the norm. But especially as you get higher on the ladder, everyone's going to be more and more active with their Hellions, and you'll hit parts of the ladder where every single player is diving 4 or 6 Hellions into a mineral line, and you've let your creep get pushed back here and stuff, which is a bit of a bummer. And notice, like, your queens are running back right now. It's like, you're almost afraid of the Hellions. Like, you should have 2 queens out on the left spreading creep, 2 on the right spreading creep, if anything, at this point. We should almost be like, you know, we should have creep connecting it all, and we should have extra queens that are building that are going to replace them, right? So there'll be moments where you're like, oh, shit, I'm using all my queens to defend. Maybe I'll have to tell them all to do an inject on the natural and the third just temporarily before coming back to the front. But we're waiting, but then we're going to rely on the new queens to replace them. Either way, let's make this nice and simple, dude. Let's make this really nice and simple, okay? How can we make this as simple as possible? First things first, those 3 queens. First 3 queens, inject, and all add to defense key. Okay, that's going to be huge. Next queens, replace them as injectors. And what's going to be cool there is it doesn't matter if there's a few seconds downtime on injecting those hatcheries. You got a quick 3rd hatch, you're producing really great, you're doing a really nice build. And by doing this, you're going to be able to spread your creep a little bit better as well. So that'll give you even more vision to go and mobility to go with this fantastic Overlord spread that you've got. So that's going to be really good. So it's going to be almost like a default muscle memory is just A move, creep queens to wherever Hellions are, right? It shouldn't be we're looking at it and we're it should just be like, Hellions are rotating to the 3rd, A move queens to the 3rd on the minimap, continue doing our shit at home. Okay?
Cool.
Yeah, so we got massively disrupted by this. Okay, that's going to solve so much, dude, because this was a very light pressure. 4 to 6 Hellions absolutely threw a spanner in the works, and that's honestly solved if we just have that opening phase a little bit more organized and ready for this sort of thing. So, Yeah, that'll be really nice. This should be really nice. Because like I said, you did such a good job during the Reaper harass of keeping up your drone production. You were like, oh, I fall apart to harass. I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Because you did so good there. I was like, what? But it was the Hellions just rotating around that were just a little bit too slow to deal with, eh? And then it seems like every single queen's at the front now, which doesn't make any sense. Like, why did we bring these extra 3 queens to the front, do you think?
It's just because I don't feel comfortable. I didn't know. I just don't know what to do, right? So,
Okay.
so that's why I brought all of them. But yeah, that's why I'm getting the coaching for these replays.
Yeah, no worries, man. I mean, that's just it. Yeah, it kind of tells you you just like lost your path. Okay, no worries, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I thought you might have been worried about a big attack coming, but I guess you just kind of were just in a bit of a no man's land. You just weren't sure what the next step was. No worries. I think because you didn't have a spore, these banshees might do damage and stuff. Floating lots of money. Yeah, we just chased off creep with zerglings. So now and I think you're kind of confused because you're like, oh, are these guys injectors? Like you're not building more queens to inject.
Yeah.
So you don't really have any plan right now other than every single one of your macro units is part of your army. So we can see that you just kind of lost your way because of the early game, and that's kind of interesting. So I think it's really worth us talking a little bit about, hey, what if we go off book a little bit? Because we are seeing that little lack of flexibility. And this was based off of what? 4 Hellions poking around and picking off a creep tumor. They didn't do anything. So maybe we want to look a little bit on a loose angle of your situational awareness. Now, obviously, cleaning up the opening is good. Having a tighter opening that defends more things is good. But there is that real advantage, like I said, to like dealing with chaotic situations, right? So I think let's go back to about 4 minutes and let's put ourselves in our shoes and let's try and pick a direction. Okay, so this point here, opponent's in our face. Oh, shit. I just want to deeply hit home. Whenever you're in a chaotic situation, let's think of some really good kind of pointers. This is just early game chaos, right? Early game ZvT chaos. Don't stop building queens, right? So even if you ended up building like, oh shit, I built 10 queens this game, which normally I'm not a big fan of because it's kind of too many. If you are feeling you need to bring your queens to the front to defend, always build extra queens to replace them, basically, right? So don't stop building queens. Every time you pull a queen, replace it. So that's kind of like a rule that we can just have in general in ZvT, right? Yeah. The only exception is obviously if there's a layer making, you can't do that straight away. But otherwise, that's going to help us. Okay, number one. What's another thing? Queens are always happy to fight Hellions, okay? So we're never running away from Hellions. Because this is like the thing that made me most uncomfortable here is that you kept backing away. You'd like put down a tumor and then you'd run away. And I was
I'll tell you why. In other games, I guess maybe I'm just overextending, but sometimes the Hellions run right by, and if my queens are too far out, then the Hellions will get into my mineral line. Like that has happened to me a couple times, and that's I think why I'm not pushing out with my queens.
You're kind of you're like, we're gonna sit back and guard. The thing is, you're meant to be droning your third already by this point, and then some, right? So. We can't be sitting back. The Zergling's job is that. So notice how your Zerglings are kind of running around with your queens. So remember, queens are the trident, the Zerglings are the net. Right. The Zerglings hang back. Their job is to stop the Hellion run by. You won't always have enough. It's not always clean. Sometimes they run in, they beat the Zerglings. But as long as you do enough damage to them, like you can lose some drones, it's totally fine. You've got a robust economy. If they get in, it's not the end of the world. The idea is the queens, as long as we're out front, and remember what I said, the Hellions rotate. Can they run past the queens? Yes. But they should always take a damage doing it to the queens. And then if we see them doing it, we also A-move the Zerglings. The Zerglings will block and interrupt the Hellions before they get too far past the queens. So that gives your queens extra hits. Your Zerglings get extra hits because they're fighting on creep. If they run away from the Zerglings, right? Because that's normally the best micro versus Zerglings. Run away, shoot the Zerglings. Run away, shoot the Zerglings. That whole time, they're taking more damage to the queens, okay? So queens are always on the edge of creep, intercepting the Hellions. And the Zerglings are your insurance. They're your net that stops them running past, okay?
Definitely. Yeah, we talked about this last session, and I obviously just didn't do it this game.
I know you've been doing it in some of your games for sure, yeah. It's just like, it just kind of like remind ourselves of that concept, because it's so easy to have one bad Hellion run by, kill like 10 drones, and then you totally change your whole game because of it. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, when you look at it from the Terran perspective, you see that killing 10 drones for 6 Hellions is not that great. Like if the Zerg player is like droning, even during the attack especially, no, not at all, right? Because as a Zerg, you can explode your economy back up, right? And they give up a lot of map control, which means your creep can spread freely. Suddenly the Zerg doesn't have this interruption in their rhythm. So what's that mean? It means you as the Zerg, getting way too fancy this Terra player, that's hilarious. You suddenly get to hit your macro cycles perfectly because he's not interrupting you once he gives up map control like that. If he comes in with Libs or a Banshee or a Battle Cruiser, he doesn't have the Hellions to back it up, which means you only need to deal with one thing at a time. So it's actually like totally okay. Once we put things in context to remember, losing some drones is not the end of the world, right? Our opponent has to pay a cost for that. If our opponent runs in, kills 35 workers, we had 2 Zerglings, our queens were completely out of position. Yeah, that's a situation we should fix, but that's an extreme example where there's a lot of other things that have gone wrong, right? So just remember, as much as we'd like to take no damage, roll with the punches, don't change your game plan because of 1 or 2 Hellion run-bys. This is like the big habit that we all make in RTS games, where one time a thing doesn't work out for us, and rather than understanding like the details of that, we kind of change our whole structure and we become more and more paranoid, right? This is like, Bronze League mentality, right? Obviously, we're not doing Bronze League stuff, but it's like that's the extreme example, right? You've seen the guy who builds the engineering bay as the first structure and the planetary in the main, or the forge and the 2 cannons in the main. That's really common in Bronze and even Silver League. And in team games and 4v4s, right? There's these players like, well, one time a guy Ling rushed me, so I always need to build spines and cannons on one base. And that's this thing which is
Bezos box.
On a much softer level and less obvious level, happens to everyone right through to pro level, where they start just playing overly safe in situations they don't need to. So it's one of those things we've always got to keep an eye on. Overall, I think this is really good though. Queens, happy to take the fight, always out on the edge of creep, pushing the creep, fighting the Hellions, right? And the idea is always happy to take a fight with those queens. Don't be wandering one queen way off creep and getting her killed by 6 or 8 Hellions, but otherwise you'll be fine. Otherwise, keep replacing queens. Every time you pull a queen, replace a queen. Good habit. If we get those 2 things in there, think of the Lings as the net that hangs back behind the queens. Get that habit of, Hellions are rotating, move the queens, bam. This opening is going to be really beautiful. So I think those are just some, outside of your specific build and when you build your queens and when you pull your queens to the front, those are some things that are a bit more universal. And they should avoid games like this kind of going this way in the early stage.
That makes sense.
Ooh. Okay. So you got 3k minerals. You've only got 1 macro hatch. So, and you still haven't replaced your injecting queens. Oh my lord. So this game was like 5 minutes of pure chaos. This is the sort of game, if you played this yesterday, I would say this is so valuable for you to either immediately after or within 1 day, try to remember your mindset and that feeling of pure, because I bet your fucking pupils were dilated and you had adrenaline pumping. I 100% I know this sort of game where you're just, you're staring everything the Terran does. You're kind of tracking it and staring at it with your eyes. You've got fear running through your veins, right? Because at no point did you reset and drop your double Evo chamber and go back to injecting. So this was the perfect game for you to go, okay, try to find the moments where that started happening, whatever, and deep breath in, hold it, deep breath out. Let's do a macro cycle, right? Let's build units, do a macro cycle, build units, do a macro cycle, build units. Because if you found your way to do that, you could have got back in this game. Check it out. Check out the supply. If you could spend your bank, even 1,500 minerals of that, you're actually at a pretty similar supply count. You got Bane speed at not a bad timing considering how the early game went. So this is actually really cool. That's always reassuring. It tells you that you could have got back in this game if you reset your queens or built extra queens and got back on the macro cycle at any point in this game. And this is not 1 minute of panic. This started at about 4 minutes, I think. Definitely at about 5 minutes. We hadn't been injecting in a while, I guess. We eventually we built 3 more queens at 5 minutes, and I thought that's where you were about to reset and kind of get back on your focus. And you started transitioning a little bit. Let's just look at your camera movements real quickly. Just for this period here, let's just watch your camera movements because I think that'll tell us a little bit as well. I always try to watch my camera in games where I fall apart and I go, what was I looking at? Because that tells me a little bit about where my mind was.
Yeah, it's definitely very helpful.
So you realized you were oversaturated, you box the drones, and then you put 3 on a gas. Yeah, and then you're watching the Hellions. You're spreading. So that's like, yeah, it's like a cute little one there, right? On your natural, check this out. You kind of realize, hey, I have too many drones. But look at how much you're staring at those Hellions. So that's, just watch this one more time. Watch what you're doing with your camera here. And I want you to imagine, same scenario, same vision. Every time these Hellions come, you're A-moving your queens on the mini-map. So like now, you see the Hellions going to the left. All right, we just A-move the queens over to the left. And then we focus on our macro for a bit. Now, obviously, I understand you kind of didn't feel confident doing that because you didn't have many Zerglings. Also, your Zerglings should have been sitting just in your natural the whole time, right? But notice how your camera is following these queens, following these queens, following these Hellions over and over and over again, right? And we're never feeling confident kind of going back to just resetting. So let's say your opponent's really good at rotating the Hellions. What can you do? As the game gets to this point, 6 or 8 Hellions, are they going to hit the natural? They're going to hit the third. You've got lots of macro to do. You need to take gases, transfer. Build a few extra lings if you feel you need it. Halflings in the natural. Halflings in your third. And split your queens. 2 over at the third. 3 over here at the natural front. You see where those signals are, by the way? Or no?
Yes.
Yep. And then you can actually go, okay, cool. I'm just going to ignore those Hellions because he could be queuing them back and forth, right? He might have shift clicked his Hellions to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, but we can't let that interrupt our flow. And then we go, okay, inject, double evo, transfer workers, grab the workers off the natural, move them to the third, just reset the rally points, yada, yada, get through. Just give yourself that comfort to do it because this is not a big Hellbat attack that demands our attention. This is not a battle cruiser and 14 Hellions driving in. It's a couple of Hellions and in a Reaper. What are they really looking for? A creep tumor snipe. He's not actually going to dive in unless you are massively caught with your pants down. So this is one of those situations where, yeah, you can kind of split your queens once you get to 7, 8 queens as well. If they're really annoying with their movement and you're finding it's distracting you, split them up, take a deep breath, go back to your macro, and you got it.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also thinking about like, I don't spend a lot of time like thinking about what is the other player actually focusing on, and obviously it's not the case where they're always going to be shift clicking the Hellions, but thinking of that in that, you know, if they've shift clicked it and I'm just watching that, then obviously that's not a good choice, and they've just stole all my APM for a while.
Exactly, and even if they're not shift clicking,
yeah,
they're
even
going
if
to
they're
go
not,
SCVs, mules, build barracks, you know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, cool. I've just done my macro. Okay, I'll poke my Hellions in over here. Ah, queens are there. I'll click them to the other side. Go back macro. It's like a few seconds of focus, which they get to choose when that focus is as well, right? So they can choose to do it in between a macro cycle, like in the, you know, when there's nothing else important to do. Whereas you're the one who's like, oh shit, they're moving there. And you're halfway through injecting your hatcheries or something. So then you go to deal with that. You forget to inject your third hatch, forget to build overboard. So then you hit a supply block when you finally do, like, you know, for you, it's a lot more disruptive as the defender. Yeah. If you've got to react actively and they're just like, oh, I'll just poke over here when I have spare APM, right?
Yeah.
Mineral cluster expended.
Do you struggle versus Widow Mines a lot?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously, I mean, you just weren't producing and stuff, so you never had the material, so it's a nightmare scenario. But if your opponent's doing lots of layered Widow Mine parade pushes, just remember the pattern, okay? 80% of your Zergling Baneling goes and counterattacks them. Widow Mines can't push into you. They're not siege tanks, they're not liberators, they're very, very hard to move forward. They need to all be spread out. So this sort of army is all about set up on the edge, poke in squads of units, and bait the Zerg into taking shit fights. So you basically defend with 20% of your army and your rally of Banelings, and just every now and then you grab like 10 Banes and you just click them into their Marines and Widow Mines, forces them to stim, spread back, blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, you just keep throwing big counterattacks at them. Look at your opponent's third and natural. I didn't even need to look. I knew this was the play, because this is just what you do against a player who's setting up a crazy Widow Mine forest outside your base. That Widow Mine forest is not maneuverable. It takes a lot of time to set up, and that's ZvT. Terran wants to set up a perfect little engagement around a fucking cliff with Widow Mines and tall grass and all this sort of stuff. And if you just go fight elsewhere, you're playing good StarCraft, and the Terran's like, fuck Zerg Zimba. Just please fight me where I set my army up. because I can't be set up in two places at once. And they also can't
Yes.
punish you by
Yeah.
pushing in, because that means stimming onto creep into speed banes, which is, like I said, you click 10 speed banes into that, they have to run away and spread like crazy.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the questions that I did have is how do I deal with this, breadcrumb trail of Widow Mines? And it makes so much sense to just counterattack.
Yeah.
And it's something that really clicked for me, like probably in the last 2 months in watching a lot of the pro stuff and just the natural strategy they have of, oh, something's coming to me, I'm going to send something to you as well. Makes so much sense, right?
Especially as
So-
a Zerg, where
Yeah.
you've got mobility. They've usually got the range advantage on you, right? So
Yeah.
if you can surround them, your army is pretty good as a melee army. But if they've got like that really nice, they got choke points, they're defending, they've got terrain, all that shit helps them. Like the more set up they are for a fight, the more it helps them. The sloppier a fight is, the better for you. That's essentially the short range versus long range units. Unless you get a really perfect immaculate surround, which is of course very hard to set up. It's just like it's also just one of those things where it's like, hey, wait a second, like your opponent's attacking you, they want to fight you right now. Don't fight them.
Yeah.
Because that's doing what they want to do. You don't even have to have any more info than that. It's like, he's coming to attack me. If I can avoid fighting him, this is why giving up a base is so powerful as Zerg. Like, I have gotten better at late game Zerg versus Terran, because Zergs and players in general used to not be as good at macro, and it used to be this thing where I could just kill people with timing attacks. It was one attack, I'd do a next attack, pressure, 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 pressure. And at a certain point, too many Zergs figured out they could just give up a base and move their drones elsewhere and do that over and over and then replace the hatcheries, and hatcheries cost nothing. And I was like, oh, well, this is fucking unfair. Like, as a Terran player who wants to win with timing attacks, when the Zergs just refuse to fight your army, you're like, okay, I've got 2-2 for like a minute and a half before the Zergs got 2-2. Let's go force a fight. And the Zerg's like, no. He's just like, he's rolling banelings into my mineral lines. He's doing Zergling run bys. I'm like, fight me. I'm on top of 2 bases. The Zerg literally just pulls drones off both bases and goes to these other expansions he's already started on the other side of the map. And I'm like, fight me! And then, he's like, well, I have ultras and a flank. Now I'll fight you. And I'm like, fuck off! Like, this is not fair. Like, as a Terran player, you're building towards these strong natural timings, and you have this pressure to fight at those moments. And it's fascinating how it's same with PvT and all matchups in general, but you see it with a lot of Protoss players where they'll like slow down a Terran's push, slow it down. Colossus keep shaving off units to force fields, and then suddenly there's a giant zealot flank and they just crush the Terran army. And you're like, if that Terran made the fight happen a minute earlier, they win. But the opponent just did a great job of not letting that fight happen. They turned it into a few pretending they're going to fight, force the siege, pull back. Pretend you're going to fight, force the siege, pull back. And that's like a really good pattern through most StarCraft strategy. So it's that's cool. Yeah. If you had more units, you probably could have rolled the first push, of course. Just make sure you always rebuild your overseers and clean up the Widow Mines. The nightmare is if you lose your overseers, you forget to remake them, 10 Widow Mines spread, and they get to start firing again. If Widow Mines start firing a second time, you've massively screwed up, is my rule.
Okay, that's a good kind of goal to go for. Basically, try not to let them shoot twice.
Yeah. But yeah. I think you realize how hard it is for them to actually get on top of your bases. Those, like I said, 10 banelings at a time roll in. It's really good. In general, if you keep them on the defensive a little bit, it's really nice. When did we start our call? An hour 15 ago. So yeah, I guess we might as well go do the full hour and a half. Look through another replay, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right, host up.
This is just the next one in the list. They're 81.
No worries. Just make me the lobby boy. Sweet. Ooh, we're playing a penguin gamer. The scariest kind of gamer, man. I need to pee really quickly, so maybe grab yourself a glass of water or something, and we will hop into this one in a sec. Be right back, mate.
Sure. Yep.
All right.
Hey,
All right. Cool. So which number is this in the spreadsheet?
the next one, so 81.
I'll get 81. Just going through in order. So you harassed a lot early. Oh, you got harassed a lot. It was all double pronged and you fell apart. You pulled your injecting queens too early. You stopped injecting. You never had enough lava. You tried to keep up and respread creep. They outclassed. So this sounds like it was probably similar to the previous game, right?
Yeah,
Maybe the same
probably.
rule would save us here. What do you think?
I think so, probably.
All right. You didn't spread a creep tumor. What's going on? Oh, we didn't defend our creep tumor with our Zerglings. That was a free Reaper kill, that was, mate. So that's a bummer.
Yeah.
So you take this front third hatch. I mean, I don't take that. I think it's harder to take, but it's up to you, of course. Don't think it really matters as long as you did focus on your creep spread. But your third queen is when does that third queen start here? Let's see. Wait. So third hatch goes. Are these two queens on time? Hold on a second. Sorry. I think it's okay. I just want to double check your opening.
Yep.
Gas pool. Just felt like the queens are a few seconds late. I'm not sure, but we're just checking. Queen. Not perfectly timed. All good. Speed. Completely pulled off gas. Third hatch on 32. Beautiful. Beautiful. Creep tumor. Zerglings should have just fought there.
Yeah.
You could have just A-moved that. But in general, you saw the Reaper there. Your queen should always put the tumor behind herself, never in front of herself as well.
Right.
Basic stuff. I'm sure you don't make this mistake very often.
I probably do, but yeah, it makes sense. Put the tumor behind the queen. And then don't leave the lings just sitting there.
If the Reaper's anywhere nearby, just A-move them. If you lose two lings, who cares, right? They're not really the most... Like, their job is just to make the Reaper piss off and let us do everything else okay. That's their job, right? Okay. So you built the third queen in the main. Like I said, we really want that on the third base, on the natural for sure, because it just doesn't make sense to build it there unless this queen, after the first inject, had already moved down from the main to drop a second creep tumor. Otherwise, there's that overlap we talked about, so we'll fix that along with pulling queens to the front earlier. Queen, extra queen on the way, extra queen on the way. Okay, we're queening like crazy right now, which is, I mean, super good, I guess, because we will get our queens up at a nice time. Like your extra queens always come down on time. It's so important for us to replace that creep tumor. This third base is already so far away, so to not be replacing that creep, and why are we moving a queen to our third? So this is the same thing I see people do in Zerg versus Zerg. They're like, I need a queen to inject that as soon as it finishes. Or are you thinking about putting a tumor down? Because if we inject that, that's absolutely a travesty. Stop watching Lambo videos. He only does it in Zerg versus Zerg, but I rage really hard when I see people prioritizing injecting a third hatch when they haven't even connected the creep. So this is obviously, I'm kind of joking here, but I just remember like a month or two ago, people were like, yo, but you meant to inject the third. And I'm like, how are you going to it's a ZvZ thing. I'll rant about that later.
To your point, though, should I always be prioritizing the creep there, or is it just because they got the tumor and it's not connected? And it's
always,
so
you always want to get at least 2, preferably 3 creep tumors out as quickly as possible. Because, like, who cares about... Yeah, I mean, you want to get... Once you've got, like, your creep connecting the bases, then you've got maybe one heading that way, one heading that way. I guess it's okay. But, like, on this map, on this base especially... The whole point of taking this is to try and get creep out front of this base, like earlier, right? And in general, that's how queens and lings defend. Without creep, like you were just so weak to Hellions.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy change to make because my second creep comes out of the natural, so that's an easy change to make it at the third. And yeah, you know, I often have found I have really good creep spread on one side, but they don't come from that side, you know? So switching that to the third makes a lot more sense. So,
sorry, did you say your second creep tumor, did you mean?
Yeah, I think the first one got killed here, but in my build, just if I get to follow it, the second one comes down at the natural.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you could still do that. I think you can make a third one at this base, in fact. So,
okay,
like even with your current, the thing is you're overlapping injects in your main early, which is part of why you actually don't have as much, like your creep is delayed, remember? It's just that queen building in the main. If we just, there's just no reason to have that queen there. So small change, because you can get both. You can get 2 tumors out the natural and 1 started at the third. That's ideal, okay? Let's do it that way. I don't want to write this down because I'm not sure how it will make sense to you. So if you want to take some notes on this, if you could write it down, I would appreciate that. However, recording it or remembering it makes sense. I'm sure I'll write this. With creep tumor lingo and order of injects, it's too easy to get lost in translation. So I want it to be, just make sure you note down however you understand this. Because to me, I'm like, second batch of energy with third queen. You know, it gets confusing way too quickly. As long as we find that structure that works for us, even if you completely miss an inject or whatever on your natural, it's so important. You've got to get those 3 tumors going. It's probably the highest priority, because especially right now where you're at, you're struggling with harassment. And then you're struggling because your game's gone to shit with floating thousands of resources and never finding a way to take a deep breath and go, calm the fuck down and just spend your money. What solves our problem? Just have better creep spread and more queens out front so that we're more in control from the start of every moment. If we have a little bit more control over our situation, it's going to be easy to catch up on those injects and spending a bit later. Plus it's probably, some pros just choose to get 2 tumors before even injecting the natural. That's just what they choose to do. So it's totally fine, whichever way we choose to do it. We just want to choose something that's a bit more reliable. So that queen should have hung around / already put an extra tumor down on the natural, even if it meant skipping one. Yeah. Yep. And our overlords aren't great. If you've taken this third, this is the most important overlord we should have out here, right?
Yeah, I've practiced this enough to know where my overload should be. I think I just got messed up because I can say I definitely can, because I usually don't have overlords just going to my rally point at this point in the game. So the harassment just messed me up. But you're right, I would have them circled around the third there.
And if we look at your control groups, when do we actually add these queens? Because you said you pulled your queens to the front too early. But once again, we don't have those queens up the front yet. It's past 4 minutes. It's pretty standard. Even a player who's gone 3cc could have 2 Hellions. To us, not even have our queens ready on a control group. Yeah, you're set up for failure, right? Because any game with the Hellions poke across, as the Hellions are in, you're kind of going, ooh, add queen to control group. Ooh, add queen to control group, right? Whereas if we already have those 3 queens up front and the extra queens are building to replace them, super easy. Because if you've got 3 queens at the front, all on your control group, you could easily tell one to inject whenever you need to, if you really want to get an extra inject going on the third. You've got 4 queens at this point, which means you could have a queen also sitting in your main or your natural. And you've got a 5th queen about to pop as well. So you're actually you've got plenty of queens. Just your creep's a little slow. They're not in position. This is good. This tells us the exact same thing we learned in that last replay solves this replay as well. Okay? That is very reassuring. Very reassuring.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Once again, our queens are running away a little bit. Notice that? Your queens keep backing off. Your queens are always backing off. Exact same thing from last game. That's awesome. This tells us same solution from last game solves all of this. And you move the queens on the minimap. They're on the edge of the creep saying, this is our territory. Fuck off, Mr. Hellion. And our opponent is committing crazy hard to a giant blue flame Hellion plus Liberator dive. So our opponent needs to do crazy damage here. Will he do crazy damage? Looks like it.
Yes, they get.
Could you recover? Yes, you could recover from here though. You'd be surprised. So if I were you, I would actually try to run across, because I'd be like, well, let's hope my opponent doesn't raise their depot. And if you did that, those Hellions may have got a few more drones here, but your Lings would have ran over this lower depot and won the game. And this is the thing that happens where high-level players come back and win games that they shouldn't against lower-level players. And it's just because in this scenario, a higher-level player would say, I'm already in deep shit. Let's hope my opponent makes a huge mistake. And would go looking for it, and your opponent did. There's no way your opponent reacts fast enough to raise that depot if you just ran all 40 Zerglings. Because on a fundamental level, there's actually things that inform that decision as well, right? You way overbuilt Zerglings because of the panic in that situation. So you want to try to use that army if possible, while holding down the drone key, right? So you're holding down the drone key, which is great. The other thing is if you knew those Hellions were there, you at least should have just probably A moved them or gone for a surround or something like that. Which you do end up doing. Just to get rid of them, right? You just want to I want to focus on nothing but building drones, but then you build 10 more Zerglings here. So, when behind, catch up on that macro. You do go back to droning. Let's look at your crisis management injects. So let's watch your camera here. Regular game speed. How are we doing on our injects? Are we organized? Because it's so much more important for us to be organized in this scenario. So we stared at that a little bit longer than needed. Not the end of the world. Spreading creep, spreading creep. All good, all good. Okay, when are we going to go back and do a macro cycle? Inject. We don't have a queen there. So we're going to transfer some drones. Now we're starting upgrades. No macro cycle. You injected your main because there was no queen at your natural. You just didn't inject. Now you're sending a queen down there after doing other things. Now you're injecting the natural and the third. That should have been the priority before the upgrades. It's good that you fixed it a few seconds later. So this is good. You added it to your shopping list and you did it a little bit later. It should have been the highest priority with getting those queens back on injecting. Question. Those queens we just sent there, are they still in your defense key though? They're not. Perfect. Very good organization, mate. Very good organization. Your 5 injecting queens, or your 5 defense queens are actually out there spreading creep and defending. And your 3 injecting queens were split off your control group. Beautiful. So this is much better than the previous games where you fell apart. This was a way worse start for you than the other games from what happened in terms of damage. But organizationally, you actually have got back on track with your macro a little bit better. You've reorganized and look at how much better you're doing. Creep spread. I mean, I do want to see a few more macro cycles coming in here. We just bounced between our bases, but we didn't inject. So what's going on? Let's go back a little bit. Where's our injects at? So let's watch here. We're watching from your camera. Oh, okay, I went back a bit further than I meant to. Inject. Okay, so once those queens are back, so there's that inject. Do we do another macro cycle after that? That was about 710. Should be about 740 if we're perfect, right? Let's take a look. So we just injected our third. Did we inject the other hatcheries as well? Looks like we did. Let's check. No, that was just the third base. That was a random inject. Naughty, naughty. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, as long as we still hit our macro cycle. But if you watch this, check it out. You inject your third, you don't inject your other hatcheries. You then drop a fourth, which is very good. Do you think you're playing against mech this game because of the blue flame, right?
Swarm forces under attack.
I'll be honest with you. I don't even think I realized it was blue flame at this point. But
you went range upgrades though, melee range. That tells me you think it's mech, right?
I saw the comment in the chat as well. I honestly think I might. No, I got a roach warren, so maybe I was going for that.
You don't play like. I mean, surely you don't play
this
against Bio, right? This must be your verse mech build, surely.
Yeah, this was maybe a week or so ago, so I don't exactly remember. But yeah, it could be deliberate because I'm making roaches.
I mean, it's got to be deliberate. There's no way. That's not your game plan, right? I mean, you do things for a reason. I've seen you play. There's no way you're going range upgrade, melee, and roaches versus... Yeah, after the Hellions and the Lib, and it was a 2-pronged heavy Hellion attack. Yeah, you thought it was mech, and that made perfect sense. It's a good read. I would have thought it was mech here as well. Your opponent's doing one of these weird back and forth builds. Super weird. So... Check it though. We were doing good, but then we didn't stick with our macro cycle, which was a bit of a bummer. So we finally reset the queens, which was so good organizationally, and then we kind of froze up. So remember, 710 is when you reset queens. You got one on your natural and your third. You've just done an inject. So your priority here should be droning. Now, one thing you missed here, a really big thing, you got no map vision, right? So we should have put a few Zergling spotters out, right? We've already got one in the middle, which is, I guess, okay. But we should have had one outside his base, one on the bottom, to see when his attack comes, just to give us a bit more comfort.
I think I did have one on the bottom. I don't know if it served much purpose to me, but I feel like...
I think you do in a little bit. There we go.
Oh, okay,
so we do send it out. Why are you building more queens here, do you think?
Probably because I had minerals and didn't know what to do with them and just thought I need to spend them. But I think that now that I say that, the default option at that point should be a macro hatch, not more queens.
Yeah, 2 macro hatches, man. If anything, right? Like just hatches. You should never be spending minerals on queens. That's never what you want to do unless you're literally being all in and you need anything you can to survive. And even then, that should be your lowest priority, right? Roaches, laying spines, anything else has got to be better than popping out a queen 40 seconds later that does next to no damage.
Yeah.
So, you're droning up. You're trying to recover, and it looks like you think you're going up against mech. So you're going to try and play probably Roachling Bane, Ravageling Bane against mech, yeah?
Yeah, I don't think I ever get any Ravagers up, but that would be the plan.
That would be the plan, though, right? Yeah. Okay. Romance side replay. So I think this is cool, dude. I think honestly, you're doing good. I mean, the fact you put a spotter out is great. Maybe not as deep as it could have been. No, it's good. And you actually see him moving out. Unfortunately, you kind of freak out a little bit here. So already, you had a bunch of lava sitting there for the last 20 seconds. You weren't spending, right?
Yeah.
Spending should be your highest priority, and it should be hatcheries, right? 4th base, 5th base, macro hatch. If we took a hatch instead of building queens, that would be great. And we should have built overlords as well. If you weren't supply blocked, and if you were injecting right now rather than pulling queens to the front, you'd be good. So you are still in like the early game mindset here, where you see this attack coming, and watch what you do here. Look at your camera. So you're like, oh, there's an attack, and look at what you do. Check this out. You're trying to decide what to do. You're moving spores to the front of your base. For some reason, you're building a spore there. And then you grab every queen and you pull them to the front. Now you build 5 roaches, which is not bad. But for me, the priority there is build roaches, build overlords. And then maybe, okay, I've got extra queens building. I might as well pull these to the front. Like, maybe I'll move my spore forward on my 3rd. But I don't know why building a spore crawler was your first response there. So once again, if this game was a bit fresher, we'd go, what the hell are we thinking there? Maybe you saw the Widow Mines and you thought you needed detection? Just move the spore forward, though, is going to be way better there. Super, super easy, yeah. Once again, what are we seeing as a pattern here, dude? These guys who are super aggressive versus you, their macro is not that crazy, right? His 3rd's just floating out now. And 1-1's not even done. Only started +1 attack. Forgot the armor. Only has 3 barracks building right now. It does have 2 factories, which is kind of wild. But yeah, so this is kind of cool, because once again, it tells us if we could have defended this attack, we would have been all right. Now, we're still not building overlords, so you still haven't realized you're supply blocked here, which is the biggest problem. Now, you're going to give up this base, which is kind of a mature decision. We just didn't do the other things first, that's all. So, oh, you actually keep the base alive. Super lit. All right, we've got an overseer there already. We didn't realize. We're going to clean all that up. Very nicely done. Unfortunately, the Widow Mines get out of there, which is a big bummer for us. And now we're going to make mass roaches. So you're deciding to play a roach style now. You swapped styles. You're still not droning or doing macro cycles. So just looking at your priorities post-combat. So you're cleaning this up. You've pulled every queen. So you even pulled the extra queens. That's a big mistake, right? Always leave injecting queens.
Mineral swarm forces under attack.
So you said with that attack, obviously putting the queens is not a good idea. Is there a bit of a rule of thumb for at what point you should not pull your injecting queens? Like maybe after the first push?
Maybe like after 6 minutes or so, 6:30. Like it's the point where there's stim marines, you're on 3 base, 4 base first, 4 base. Pulling 2 queens isn't going to make a difference in those fights, essentially, right?
Yeah, okay.
6 hellbats, 5 marines, and a medevac. Pulling 2-3 queens makes a difference, right? But this attack was pretty late in the game. This is moving out at 7 minutes 30. You're on 3 full bases of economy almost. You're a little under, but you're basically there, right? And it's just that how it, building overlords and just pumping units efficiently by far is the more important thing, right?
Yeah.
So it should be a game sense thing. You should be able to know, hey, wait a second. This isn't the point where my 4 queens are going to defend the fight. Am I going to bring my queens to help? Sure. I'll bring the queens I've already got on a control group, but it's all about your unit production. We're past that stage. So I think you just lost track of where you were in the game a little bit. I don't think you'd normally be focusing on that, but it's just because you failed to adapt to the earlier damage you'd taken, right? You were thrown into a very unfamiliar waters. And it's very standard to kind of misread where you are in the game and treat it like it's earlier or later than it is because of that. But that kind of, I think, also falls in with the fact that you were kind of still producing queens for some reason when you already had 8 queens out. So you were kind of stuck in this early game mentality, which going up to 10 queens, hey, if you know it's a battle cruiser or you're under heavy pressure, you're trading queens, there's lots of action, so you're just building extra queens to replace the ones you're pulling because they're constantly diving with Hellions and they're picking off queens and there's all this action and you go 10 queens and you're droning at the same time. Like, that makes sense, right? It's just in this scenario, it was kind of like, hey, wait a second, you defended the big attack, you killed tons of Hellions and a Liberator. We didn't need to go to 10 queens at this point. It's past the queen stage in the game because you're both going up to stem bio versus roach speed, bane speed, big 3, 4, 5 hatch production. It's just a different stage in the game where queens really are a creep spreader and an injector, and that's really their main purpose.
Definitely, it's not something that I know in the moment, but after the fight, I've sometimes had the clarity to think like, oh, I have a huge army left over, and look at all these queens. And in those moments, I do realize, okay, I committed too much, right? And maybe you spent larva. It's like, oh, so those are all lost drones, right? So it's something that I'm slowly getting more conscious of, but seeing it and hearing you talk about it in this context definitely highlights that a lot more.
Yeah, man. So I think the last thing here is look at the time you clean up this fight. 8:15. Beautiful. You absolutely can get back in this game. But you're struggling because you've got to send queens back to inject, right? So you just told queens off your hotkey to inject. You basically, what you did there is you said all queens go inject. Then a Widowmine shot your queen and you panicked and pulled the whole control group back. So no one went to inject. And
the way I'm doing that is probably not ideal because I won't take them out of the group typically until they're at the hatchery. So if something like this, I'm just hitting 5 and then pulling them. So I've noticed this many times in my games.
Because you had 40 seconds. If you, in that 40 seconds, did a macro cycle, built a big round of roaches, started roach speed, which is the most important upgrade that you're missing, you could have just hammered this army with roaches and ravages, defended, drone to 70 drones or whatever, played whatever the hell you wanted in the late game. You would have been fine. But instead, no macro cycle ever happens for a full minute. And it is the most important point after a fight when you've already spent probably a full minute. And that was a really long fight, remember, because you pulled back, gave up the base, then came back in and sniped it. That was a long fight where there was no macro happening. So it was even higher priority, always. What is that layer we need to get back to? What allows us to make comebacks? The moment the dust settles, number 1 macro cycle, then do other things. What did you focus on? You did try to do the macro cycle, but you'd already messed things up for yourself by pulling every queen to the front completely unnecessarily. You then focused on your upgrades. You got distracted by the Widowmines you didn't finish cleaning up in the previous fight. And this is all a flow-on effect from the earlier mistakes, which of course comes back to the same things from the previous replay. Queens up front earlier, creep spread better a bit earlier. Go fucking fight those Hellions. A move on the minimap when they rotate. Lings are the backup if they dart in. If they dart in, that's cool. Keep rolling with the punches. The problem is your first 5 minutes or first 4 minutes is some of the most flawless injecting and drone production we've ever seen. Honestly, I would prefer you fuck up there a little bit more, but we need you to roll with the punches a little bit more in the next bit. Get the queens out front. Be confident fighting those Hellions with queens. And this is the number 1 affliction every single Terran player, Zerg player has against Terran. It's one time the Hellions dart past and then people get really afraid with their queens. Or they lose a few drones on their third and they go, oh, I don't think I can drone my third. And they end up massing Zerglings again.
Yeah.
Don't go back to the dark side. Embrace the power of the queen. There is nothing a Hellion player finds more frustrating than every time those Hellions go forward, the queens greet them. And they're like, so what do I do? Do I run past and just get surrounded by Zerglings? Think about it from the Terran perspective. It is a frigging nightmare if that Zerg just always intercepts with the queens, keeps pushing the creep forward, keeps macroing. It is really difficult for Terrans to play against. And I think once we think about it from that perspective, everything suddenly becomes a lot more peaceful because we get this idea of, man, I got to constantly chase these Hellions. They're doing everything. They could dart in. It is such a gamble for them to dart past your queens with those Hellions. If they just lose 6 or 8 Hellions getting surrounded, it is so bad for their early game. They give up all map control, all freedom. They give you a free pass to like 70, 80 workers, depending on how greedy you want to be. It's really bad for them, man. So I think that's really cool and empowering is just having that little bit of perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
All right, mate, we got to finish up there. Good sesh, though. Honestly, the early game was looking really tight. So hats off to you. I am so impressed with that first 4 minutes in terms of the drone production. The Reaper handling is great at the start. Just that one game where you lost the creep tumor was the only time the Reaper actually did any real damage to you. There's one that got a drone as well, but that's like, honestly, it's fine. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you lose a drone. So yeah, early game's tight. If you can add the queens getting out front to it, you should be able to just assert dominance, get your rhythm going, and you're going to have a lot of fun.
Cool. I have one quick question before we go. Do you have any episodes planned for the Pig Show coming up?
I do
'Cause
not.
I love that shit.
I do not. Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. I might, for me, I canceled it as an actual podcast because I just was like, I've got too many different things I'm focusing on. But we'll see at some point. I'm sure I'll still just be interested to be like, man, I really want to just have a long talk about to some pro players and just hear their thoughts about things. So it's zero schedule. At some point I will be inspired and it will come back, but I really appreciate the feedback, man.
Yeah. I got the idea from the TLL episode to do the spreadsheet. So anyways.
Oh, awesome. Oh yeah. He's such an organized man.
Yeah.
That's actually sick. All right. Awesome.
All right,
mate.
I'll let you get to Terran.
No worries,
thanks
dude.
for the session. I'll give you a shout when I need it.
Hells yeah, dude. Good luck on the ladder,
Cheers.
mate. Looking
Thanks,
forward
dude.
to you just slaying. Kick some ass.
Cheers.
Good night, man.